That's going. Okay, and I am enabling the live transcript, which does have some interesting little quirks to it. All righty. So, so my name is Chris Craveland, and I am going to open up today's LBC meeting. This is December the 9th. This is a 11 a.m. meeting of the LBC. As I mentioned, it is being recorded. And for anyone's interest, there is a live transcript going for which we, it's doing its own thing. So it does have some odd transcriptions. We won't be saving the transcript. I think, as I mentioned, we have a number of folks from Solitude on this call. We'll do introductions in a moment. And today's agenda will be primarily focused in on a discussion with Solitude around our year-end report for the herbicide treatment for 2021 and their recommendations and questions related to that. So during that time, I would like for the LBC members, the 3 LBC members, and Red kind of to take the lead. If there are members of the audience that have questions, just kind of raise your hand. And we will recognize folks as appropriate. So that will be the primary thing for today. And then we may or may not have need for a bill for payment. We will, at the end of the session, have public comment if necessary. And then kind of go to our normal things for new business and the date of the next meeting. We would let Solitude go after the first agenda item. So when we get through that, those folks will be able to leave. All right. So
Chris, just for a moment, do you want to just check in with Laura Diamond to make sure she says the hearing impaired, see if she's able to follow the transcript or if that process is working?
Yes, you can.
Yes, you can. Okay, thanks, Laura. Okay.
All righty. So let's start with introductions. We'll start on the LBC side of this. So as I mentioned, I'm Chris Craveland, current chairperson of the commission. Let's move down the line. Conray.
Yep, Conray Wharf, member.
I'm Dan Barstow. I'm the clerk, but also the project lead for the state-funded study of Lake Boon we call the Healthy Lake Boon Initiative.
Excellent. Red?
Red Aylward. I'm one of the interfaces to Solitude. Just started doing that this year. Live on the lake.
Excellent. And Dave?
Yeah, Dave Gray. I'm the treasurer of the Lake Boon Association, but I provide a lot of technical support for the lake study going on.
Thank you. And let's see. Okay, I think everybody else.
Andrew?
Yeah, I don't see Andrew back on again.
No, he's there.
Hey, I can introduce myself. I'm the project manager from Brown and Caldwell, a consulting firm working with the towns of Town of Stowe and Hudson, and doing the technical study under the state-funded grant. Here to listen and incorporate findings into that project.
Excellent. Thank you, Andrew. All right, so now I think we can switch over to.
And actually, Chris, if you could, sorry, but it might help if Pam and Kathy also introduced themselves.
Sure. So we have 2 members of our conservation commissions. So go ahead, Pam. Oops, you're on mute, Pam. Still on mute.
The microphone's not working.
Is that better?
That's better.
There you go.
Okay, I was trying to get these ear things to work so I don't disturb the rest of my office. I have all these different places, and anyway, it doesn't matter. I'm Pam Helmick. I'm the conservation agent for the town of Hudson.
Excellent. Kathy.
And I'm Kathy Sparra. I'm the conservation director for the town of Stowe, and I'm eating my lunch, so I'm going to keep my screen off for a few minutes.
Sure, absolutely. Okay, so David, you want to start with the Solitude folks?
Yeah, good morning. I'm Dave Manch. I'm the field operations manager for Solitude for the New England district and also for New York.
Dominic Maringolo here. I'm project manager here in the New England district. I do have some past experience with Lake Boon. So Dave asked me to join in this time to see if I could help as well.
Can you clarify your past experience with Lake Boon?
I actually was managing the project for a few years prior to Kara. I do remember Conray. I think we talked back then. I don't remember the exact year period, but I think it was probably over 3 years ago, and I managed it for a few years.
Great.
So,
Under the rubric of Solitude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Excellent.
I'm Sam Corbin. I am one of the biologists here at Solitude, and I spent the early season survey on Lake Boon, and that was my first time being on the water body.
Hi, I'm Sean McCarthy. I'm a project manager at Solitude. I'm a relatively new employee here, so I'm mostly in learning and listening mode today, and Dom will be taking the lead for today. So nice to see you all.
Excellent. All right. I think that covers our kind of official participants today. And all right, so let's jump in. And I think if we just start, maybe if there is any just general questions from the commission, just very general, before we kind of jump into the kind of the individual detail. I think that I had one general question that probably I could find somewhere in some of the old information, but when we start to look at the survey results, is there a definition of sparse versus trace versus moderate versus dense? Like, is that a number? Is that just an observation? How do you determine which of those to apply?
Sam, do you want to take that one maybe?
Yeah, so it's based off of a percentage of coverage as determined by the Army Corps of Engineers. I believe they use the methodology that we use, and we've established it through all of our management or survey techniques. We take a throw rake, and based off of either visually seeing off of the boat, or as you pull in the vegetation as it's collected on the rake, you can see trace tends to be a 0 to 25% coverage. Sparse is 26% to 50%. Moderate would be 51 to 75%, and then dense would be, which is the highest density that you could possibly have, which would be 76 to 100% total coverage. It may be something that is in other reports, but I have it in front of me, and it's not a definition that I see in this specific one.
In an old Solitude document, I saw it talking about fingers of weeds versus a handful versus, a rakeful versus I can't get it in the boat.
Yes, that's definitely
there was scale, something like that in an old report.
That's more specific to a rake throw analysis. So it's like in relation to the size of the rake, it's a finger, a handful, but as a larger scope, it's more of a full observational percentage. And
when you do that, do you differentiate between different types of weeds, or is that overall coverage?
Absolutely. It's species specific, but it's also documented total, like nuisance, or not, I shouldn't say nuisance, but assemblage density.
Yeah, so like a fingerful would be translated to trace, a handful translated to sparse, and then so on. But looking at the report too, I mean, we are estimating percent cover of the bottom in the tables at the designated points as well. So it's just different ways of designating both the cover, or how much of the bottom's covered, as well as how how much biomass there is, or how much of that bottom cover, and how much it reaches for off the bottom all the way up to the top. So it's a kind of a combination of bottom cover and height of the plants.
Okay. So I think that it might help. I will screen share, which means I probably won't be watching each of you on your screens. I will screen share the report. I think I have it up here. That way we can, yeah, there it is. Okay. Kind of run through it in detail. Okay. All righty. Are folks able to see that now?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. All righty. So let's we'll just kind of go maybe page by page, unless LBC members and David and Red, if you have other general questions before we dig in here. That work?
Sure.
Okay. All righty. So I'm going to start right at the beginning. Obviously, this is the one that we received November 15th. First thing I just noted is that here where the order of conditions are referenced, oops, maybe get this out of my way here. This is, I don't believe this is the correct order of conditions number for our Hudson, because we did have a renewal.
Yeah, I can check in to see
get a new
about
one.
that.
So yeah, I believe it's 190-0362. And we did send that along. That was provided to Solitude prior to the treatment date. So you guys should have copies of that.
Okay, we can fix
All
that.
right. Next thing that I had a question on is the this program chronology, the interim post-treatment survey. So it indicates that there was one done on the 29th of July. So Sam, was this one that you did? Oops, Sam, you're on mute.
Unfortunately, I broke my foot probably 2 days before then. So no, I was only able to do the early season survey.
Okay.
I would have if not for the injury.
So who did that one?
That was Amanda Mahaney, I believe.
Okay.
In addition to the late season survey.
Okay. Dave, can you confirm that interim was done by Amanda? I know the post was.
Yeah, bear with me. I'm searching for that right now, Chris. I should have that in just a moment for you.
Okay. And I guess one of the questions that I had in general is, I don't think we knew that someone was on the lake at all that day. And I don't believe we ever saw any results from an interim survey indicating that, saying that the treatment looked good, or there were new issues or old issues popping up in some of our in some of our coves or anything like that. So is that we just missed something? Is there generally an actual response, some sort of a I don't know, results given from the post treatment survey?
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Dave.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say that's something that you should have received. So I am going to look this right now to see if that is something that may have been missed and not sent out. So if that's the case, I do apologize. But I believe that Sam is correct. It appears as though Amanda did conduct that survey, but let me continue looking for that information for you.
Okay. And would we?
Can I ask just a timing there? How often after the initial treatment do you normally do a follow-up? This was 2 months. Is that typical?
Yeah, between 1 and 2 months. Yeah, the herbicide works within 2 to 3 weeks. But it's partially to see how the treatment works, but also just to see if there's anything in different areas that may have popped up mid-season. So it serves a dual purpose.
Yeah, it does seem that that's a long time after the treatment. If you need to do any kind of boost or anything, is that an optimal time or what?
I think we could, looking at it from that standpoint, I think it certainly could be done a little bit earlier, a month, anywhere between a month and a half. But again, we're also trying to see if there's any growth in other areas that may not have needed treatment that during the first application. So we want to give time for some of those plants to become visible as well. So again, it serves a dual purpose, the timing as well. It's not just to make sure that we killed the plants we were supposed to kill from that first treatment, but also to kind of take an overall look at the lake and see if there's anything that's cropping up kind of mid-season that may need to be addressed.
There's also for the mid treatment, the survey, the orders of conditions ask for quality of water assessment. Specifically, we're trying to see, has this dissipated effectively? Now, dicot, which was this year's, is typically a 5 to 7 day dissipation. Sonar is longer, and I don't know if you really need to do a test for dicot, but it is something in the order of conditions to make sure that there's no lingering presence of the chemicals. Do you have any comments on that?
You're absolutely right. Dicot typically is gone from the water within 5 days. And vast majority of our programs, we do not find the need to test for the dicot after. It's a pretty well understood product. And it does dissipate very quickly, matches very well with the water use restrictions that are posted following the treatment. So there's it drops down to about 10% of its initial application rate within 24 hours. We just don't see the need to do that. If it was in the order of conditions, and I know you've spoken with Dave about this extensively in past meetings, we did fall short on collecting some of the post-treatment water quality information. We know that. So if that was required and should have been done, then obviously that unfortunately was part of the missed work.
So if you were to test for it, the point is that we're trying to make sure that it's dissipated. There's no lingering health issues that we need to think about. The water is safe for use. And in any case, if dicot has a standard dissipation rate that's well documented in the research, that kind of data helps justify sort of the lack of analysis. Although if you were to do one, how would you?
Well, you're absolutely right. It's very well documented dissipation rates, and in conjunction with the water use restrictions, I mean, there's really no concern on the usability of the water after the water use restrictions. And from our perspective, it's not a necessary test. I certainly understand that you have your own goals and your own people that you're dealing with. If that was part of, if that's an extra kind of measure of caution or a feel good thing that we know that we tested after, but it's basically a water sample. We go out, collect the water sample, send it off to a lab to have the dicot analysis performed, and it would give us a result of how many parts per million of dicot would be left in the water. After 5 days, though, based on our experience, there's an infinitesimal chance of there being any dicot in the water, and certainly not anything that would have any either herbicidal effects or health effects on anybody or anything using the water.
Yeah, so not to belabor this point, but Pam Helenek, who is on this call, is the conservation agent and the head of the Hudson Conservation Commission, the group that has most recently asked, and so too the Stowe and Kathy represents them. And so as a follow-up to this, we will communicate with them and just see, given the case of dicot, that it's well documented, if there was some kind of scientific study you could provide to us that might obviate that need, but it was a missing piece of this analysis.
Absolutely. And the years we do sonar, there's a secondary purpose to sampling. Again, we didn't use sonar this year, but sonar, as you folks know, is a multi-application type of a process, longer contact time. So the herbicide sampling actually helps us time the timing and the dose of the follow-up treatments. So it's not really from a health perspective or a water use restriction perspective, but to help guide the program.
Is fast test still the standard metric for sonar?
Sonar, yeah, and it's done by the manufacturer of sonar, CPRO.
Dominic, I would
Yeah.
assume part of the goal of the interim survey is to determine whether the treatments are being effective and going to reach the end goal of weed reduction. Is that
Yes.
true?
Absolutely.
What did this survey tell us? Again, we've not seen the data.
No, I think we need to get the notes from Amanda, and at least if you want us to revise this report, if that's what you want us to do, we can certainly add in a short paragraph about what was found. I have not talked with Amanda, so
Is usually that survey to determine whether there are any boosters or supplemental treatments required?
There's no booster treatment per se for dicot. Dicot's a one treatment type of an application. If we saw that the target species in those dicot treatment areas was not controlled for some reason, then we would do a follow-up treatment. We would do another dicot treatment on the areas where it didn't work. Dicot, I mean, we'll get the notes from Amanda, but as far as curly leaf pondweed and milfoil, I don't remember. I could probably count on one hand how many times that treatment didn't work in the 26 years I've been doing this. That curly leaf and milfoil are very sensitive to dicot, and it's generally always works. The only thing that potentially you'd maybe see milfoil pop up in an area that was not observed in the pre-treatment survey, and so therefore was not treated, then that we would decide if there's enough that would require a retreatment, or if the other supplemental growth was bad enough to require a retreatment.
It makes me wonder whether there was an opportunity lost, because in the final report, 11 of the 30 sites had dense or moderate weeds remaining, which is much more than usual. So, again.
Well, yeah, I mean, I also have to look at, looking at the table, there were 1, 2, 3 of the 30 points did have variable milfoil, which was treated on the June treatment. But also, I mean, dicot is a contact herbicide. So we do sometimes see some regrowth later in the season, especially getting into the later end of August and September. You will sometimes see some of the milfoil grow back. That does not mean that the treatment didn't work initially. It's just that it's a contact herbicide, so some of the root crowns can sprout new growth later in the season. It's one of the reasons why we've talked a little bit about potentially using Priscillacor in the future, which is a newer herbicide that has systemic properties on milfoil, where you wouldn't see that regrowth. That's pretty typical for dicot.
Dominic, what are the parts per billion concentrations you have to maintain for sonar, and how long?
So for variable milfoil, we typically would want to see concentrations are around probably 4 to 8 parts per billion for about 60 days or so. To be honest with you, sonar was an option for systemic control. It was pretty much the only option aside from like 2,4-D, which can't be used in well areas with private wells. So sonar is not the best, wasn't the best. It worked really well on fan wort, and that's why we used sonar more so for the fan wort rather than the milfoil. But we did get control of the milfoil. But you saw the milfoil come back more readily than the fan wort. So if it was just variable milfoil, I don't think that we would necessarily have recommended sonar. That was mostly recommended for the fan wort, but Procelicor is a completely different product. It works very, very well on milfoil and doesn't work on fan wort. And it does provide even better control of milfoil than the sonar does. So definitely something we'd like to have you consider.
Thank you, Dominic.
All right. So if there are no other questions that kind of spawn from that first page, I'm just going to move on into the second page. Just a general question that I had here. It indicates a map of the pre-management survey of invasive aquatic plant distribution is attached. And I'm not clear which of the ones that we received in this report is of the actual pre-management survey. Is that just to say, when you say that this particular one, is it just to show where you do the survey points, or is it?
No, so it's actually the third map in sequence in the report. It's titled Pre-Treatment Relative Abundance of Invasive Species.
Ah, yes, it is. All right. Got it. Thank you. I don't know how I missed that.
No, I mean, ideally, if we do send you a revised report, we should really put figure numbers on the maps and reference the figure numbers in the text so it's easier for you to find.
All right, but that was pretty obvious. I just missed that.
Yeah, good idea.
Okay, any other questions on this page from anyone? Okay, let's just move on. We've got more table. All right, so I want to just show some of the text here, just a notation that this is the 2021 season, not the 2020. Okay. And I think the 50 acres is in fact what was treated this time.
Yeah, and that has a map as well, I believe.
Yeah.
Do you, Dominic, can you also provide a chart showing how much of the dicot you applied, either in different areas or in total or something?
Sure.
Okay. All right. On to the fourth page. So this is the late season. So this is one that I guess I would maybe we spend some time on this, because the verbiage here, the late season survey, is identical to last year's, which is not necessarily bad. I mean, if there's no changes, there's no changes. But the survey points results, to me, if I understand them correctly, based on some other stuff, we had a lot of cases where over at the late season survey, we had a much higher cover than we did, in the pre-survey. And so I'm just trying to understand that. So like, if I just start here, fanwort was 0 in the pre, it was 15 in the, in this one. Again, fanwort in this site was 0 in the pre and 30 after the treatment, etc. So can you just explain kind of the overall here?
Yeah, so
If I can just comment for 1 second, and I've looked through 5 or 6 years of reports on the lake, and I've never seen this many dents and this many moderates. So,
okay,
that was a shock.
in relation to your comment, your just comment, I mean, the overall abundance where you have the dense, moderate, sparse, I mean, that is including not only the target species, but also the native species. So, the dense does not mean, like 0.1, for instance, we have 15% cover of fanwort at 0.1, which is low, but the overall cover is 80% in dense. So, it's not necessarily because of the fanwort, it's also the dense designations more so from the bladderwort and the water lilies that were noted as well. But I agree. We definitely have a lot of instances of fanwort. And the fanwort was not treated. So it was last treated really in 2019 when we did the sonar herbicide treatments in basin 3 and 4. It was not treated this year because there really wasn't any in the pre-treatment survey. So this is all growth that is, kind of starting to come back from that 2019 sonar treatment. And you can see from the map, we have, a majority of it is in the basin 3 and 4. There's a couple spots where it's also historically been found over by the
Monahans and Hale Cove.
Yeah, Monahans and Hales Cove, we're finding it. So this is a sort of a typical distribution of fanwort that we've seen in the past. And this is just the fanwort starting to come back from that shot we gave it with the sonar in 2019. So you can see the milfoil and curly leaf is what was treated in the spring. So
can we just for a moment, if we could, Dominic, while you're on the topic of the fanwort,
yep.
As I recall, in your initial pre-survey assessment, you said that you will use a diquat, and then if the fanwort is starting to come back, you will, or is present, then you might do spot sonar. And you apparently, through the mid assessment, decided not to do that, although we are seeing the fanwort coming back. Am I understanding this correctly?
Yes. So, I mean, the main issue with using sonar is it's something that we need to start pretty early. It's not something that you can start in June or July. It needs to be start in May because of the sensitivity of the plants it gets less and less as they get more mature. So typically with the sonar treatments, and you'll remember this from the past times we've done it, we start that initial treatment with the sonar very early. So it's not something that we would start midstream in July if we did see the fanwort. That would something at that point you have to just note it, map it out, and potentially discuss doing sonar the following year. This is where I'm probably going to not remember, but there is another option for fanwort control. It's a contact option, the flumioxazin herbicide. I don't know if that's been used over the last few years or if it's included in your order of conditions or not, but that is a second option for fanwort, which we could kind of to determine if it's worth doing kind of a spot treatment in July, August of the fanwort with the flumioxazin herbicide instead of waiting for the sonar. But again, flumioxazin is a contact herbicide. It's not going to kill the root systems, so it only would get rid of the foliage for the rest of the year. And we still would likely want to treat it with a systemic the following year anyways.
Yeah, Dominic, you asked about the order of conditions. To be clear, the orders of conditions, very fortunately, are open. They don't specify
Okay.
particular herbicides. They say whatever is required and legal and permitted and so on. On the other hand, both towns want to know before the treatment is done what the treatment will be in order to just give it a review before we proceed.
It's flumioxazin is not ideal because it's a contact herbicide, and the fan will regrow the next season. Additionally, the state, when they approved it about 8 or 10 years ago, added some restrictions over and above the label where you can't treat the same area of the lake. You can only treat the same area of a lake once every 4 years. Which makes it very difficult to use effectively. Our preferred option is still to use the sonar herbicide and start it early. If we had a couple plants pop up and they were kind of beat up and kind of looked like they were struggling to start growing again, we would consider flumioxazin herbicide. Maybe we could, if it was kind of a new regrowth, we might be able to get some control and carry over, but where we're starting to see it pretty much throughout basin 3 and 4, I really think we probably need to start considering sonar treatment in 2022 for basins 3 and 4 on the 2 coves in the main basin.
Dominic, do we have the option to look at the interim data now, just to try to understand this better?
The interim survey data? Yeah, I think we're
Right.
gonna have to catch up with, so it looks like it wasn't included in the report, so we're gonna have to catch up with Amanda or Samurai. We'll have to catch up with her and get her observations and notes from her.
Yeah, I just have to say, Dominic, we've been asking for that interim report for a few months.
Okay, well, I don't know that it was, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not sure that the points were required, that the points were collected in the mid-season survey either, but I'm maybe incorrect. It may be more anecdotal observations on the part of Amanda, so we'll have to.
Hey, Dominic, it's Conray. If we're gonna do a sonar treatment, when we first did the very first time we treated the lake, we used sonar and we kept it around 20 parts per billion, if my memory is right, which is below, I think, is legal, but not, it's way higher than you talked about. But we used a barrier between basins 1 and 2. If we retreat, how do we keep the concentrations in basins 3 and 4 up? Or are we going to do 3, 4, and 2?
No, the way I remember doing it at the time when I was managing it, when we did that, I don't believe we did use the barrier that year. The way we account for dilution is to
You've never used it.
I'm sorry?
You've never used a barrier. That was way back to the Lee Lyman days.
Yep. So the barrier, it doesn't stop flow. Obviously, we've found that it really doesn't do that much, to be honest with you. It's not stopping flow. It's not stopping the herbicide from passing through that channel. So it's really not necessary. The way we maintain the concentrations in basin 3 and 4 is 2 ways. We use multiple applications. So we're not just doing one application and letting it drop down for the rest of the summer. We're boosting it up a couple times to maintain that concentration. And 2, we're using the granular herbicide formulation. So it's not a liquid where we get an instantaneous concentration and it starts diluting out. The pellets release the sonar herbicide over a period of weeks, about 6 weeks. So, and it's releasing it right at the bottom of the pond, right at the bottom of the lake, right at the base of the plant. So between those 2 techniques, that's how we maintain the concentrations.
Thank you.
Okay. So I think from my perspective, I would like to see maybe you guys rethink what you write up here as the, summary of the lake season survey, because it doesn't indicate anything about we had, increased growth of significant increased growth of fan wart or any. It just sort of seems to be very, well, it's cut and paste for sure from last year, and apparently it shouldn't be, because we are seeing more growth than perhaps we did last year. So maybe this is an area you guys can rethink as to, based on the results that you saw in late season, what is your sense at this point there?
Absolutely. We can
Okay.
recraft that section.
Excellent. All right.
Hey, Chris,
Yeah.
just, we've always been on 3-year plans for a reason. And I don't know if that reason has changed or not, but the reasoning was that you do a massive treatment, knock it back really well. And then the next 2 years, all you have to do is maintain it. But again, the 3rd year out or 4th year out, it's time to do a big treatment again. Dominic, is that pretty much still the philosophy?
Well, yeah, and it's just the way that the plants regrow. So yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. I believe 2019 was the first year of the 3-year contract, and we're looking probably at the same type of cycle, 2022 being another year where we'll need to do the more intensive treatments for the fan war, and it would, again, happens to be another 3-year contract starting. So it's the regrowth cycle of fan war, and that's how the sonar works. It's the fan wart does come back slowly at first, and then once it gets started, it starts to increase pretty rapidly. And I think we're starting to see that happening in the fall here. So I think spring 22 is probably the year we'll do that and recommend another sonar treatment, just like the last few cycles.
Thank you.
And can you just clarify, when you do the sonar, do you also do dicot?
Yes, because majority of the curly leaf pondweed grows around the margins of basin 2, so that would not be a treatment area. The only treatment areas in basin 2 would be the 2 coves. That's the only place we saw fan wart, and it's the only place we've historically seen fan wart. So yeah, we would still do a dicot treatment.
Okay, thank you.
We wouldn't necessarily treat milfoil in like basins 3 and 4 with dicot, as they're going to be treated with the sonar herbicide. But we would treat the curly leaf pondweed, and we would treat any milfoil that wouldn't be in a sonar treatment area with dicot.
Dominic?
Yep.
Earlier reports at each site, they detailed for each type of weed found what the concentration was. And that seems to have fallen off for this report, and I wonder why.
I'd have to go back and look. She's saying that we broke out the different metrics for each individual species.
Right.
Okay.
Because it also leads me to wonder, when you say your assessment is the program worked well, when I'm looking at so many dense and moderates, I come to a different conclusion in my simple mind.
Well, again, remember again, the dense and moderates include the native species as well. So we're not managed. No.
The previous reports where you broke that out would have told me that.
Okay.
But you didn't supply that this year.
So yeah, we do break out the target species separately, at least for percent cover. So I'll go back and look at some of the past reports and see how it was done, and if it's possible with the data we have to back that out again.
Okay, that would
I
help.
would actually be able to clarify a tad of that. When I was working on this report with Amanda, we had looked at the previous year's tables, and she had felt that actually creating the tables that we have now would perhaps be a bit more intuitive, in the sense that we separated it by target species and then an overall abundance. looking at last tables, it has the species listed and then abundance. And I think what you're referring to as being more helpful is how there's like a corresponding comma separating species. And then say like curly pondweed, comma, variable milfoil. I'm seeing a dense, comma, sparse with like a 50, comma, 25. Is that what you're referring to?
Right, right.
I
And,
see.
and maybe I'm confusing myself by looking at overall abundance rather than the invasives.
I think that it would certainly be helpful for us to change it to maybe instead of using overall target cover and that same, overall abundance, having those corresponding, words maybe aiding in the confusion. But the intent was for, the invasive certainly being the target species of our work, that isolated target cover of what, you're hoping to target. So the dense and the 80% cover is the yellow water lily, the white water lily, the bladderwort, and then plus the 15% that includes fanwort. It was just a way for us to separate it. And
I know this
That's
comes
great.
up later in the management recommendations, but we just know just from traveling around the lake that the water lily is when there's a dense and abundance and moderate, it's often the water lily. Is that your sense that is the prevailing native the prevailing native
Certainly
weed?
based off of the results that Amanda took at for her field notes of the late season survey, it certainly looked as though the water lilies that you have and the bladderwort certainly encompass the majority of your native species for sure.
And I'm not sure who to ask this question to, but I'm just wondering about water lily, because in the past few years, there have been recommendations about water lily, and I don't know if water lily is considered invasive, but it certainly is becoming nuisance. And so should we start working on the water lily?
So when we do the sonar treatments, a secondary effect is we do often reduce the water lily population quite extensively. It's not a complete control, but we definitely get a pretty good reduction because the sonar does work on water lilies as well, just typically at a higher rate. So we're getting kind of partial control, which I think is not necessarily a goal of the treatment, but it does, I think it has helped in the past. But just like the fanwort, the water lilies will rebound pretty quickly. So they kind of would follow the same cycle as well. And I think we'll get a reduction if we do the sonar next year. There are other options to treat it individually as well. So the foliar treatments with different herbicides could be used to specifically spray certain areas of water lilies. Could be in front of people's houses or keeping a channel maintained or something like that. So, I mean, that's something that you could consider as well. If every 3-year reduction from the sonar in basins 3 and 4 is not quite getting you to your goal, you could augment that with some foliar spot treatments with foliar herbicides. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Okay. Moving on. All right. So to the meat, essentially. So ongoing recommendations. I think you've probably already explained a little bit of what you're thinking. And Dominic, as you mentioned, we are on a 3-year cycle. This was our 3rd year in that 3-year contract. And so what we'll be looking forward to is we need to be thinking about the next 3 years, clearly. Questions from our team around the recommendations here.
So I'd like to kind of frame a question here. we're now preparing the RFP for the future. And, the recommendations, we sometimes are in a kind of a spot that there's a recommendation for something, but it really requires the next 3 year, contract or something to have the budget for it. And I'm, in these recommendations, I'm wondering if there are any that we really should be explicit about in the new RFP.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the final report on the map is the post-treatment abundance of invasive species. So it actually looks like the fanwort is relegated more towards, I believe it's basin 4, the southernmost of the 2 basins. I may have them backwards. So actually, we're not showing really any fanwort if I'm in basin 3, but we are showing it in, again, the Monaghan's Cove and the Hale Road Cove. So yeah, I mean, I would say we need to be looking at doing sonar in basin 4 and the 2 coves in the basin 2, but we may not need to include basin 3. So I think you can be pretty explicit about that in the RFP. And then we had only really milfoil in the 2 coves on basin 2, but it looks like we also had a area up in basin 1, which I don't remember ever really treating up in that area. So I don't know if that's a new population or not, but that should be addressed as well with, ideally with the milfoil, ideally I think with Procelicor. I think you guys should be looking at that moving forward rather than Diquat. Diquat would be for curly leaf. That curly leaf is really the only, Diquat's still really the only herbicide that works on curly leaf.
So it would be Procelicor in addition to Diquat and in addition to sonar.
Yes.
And just to be clear again, that second recommendation, amend the orders of conditions. We don't actually have to amend, as I think I mentioned before, that order of conditions. We do need to make sure that we run this by each of the towns, but that's the order of conditions do not preclude Procelicor.
Yes, that's awesome. It's great that you guys did that. I wish that was the case for more of our towns. So that was a smart thing to do.
So I think that what we would hope to see in a recommendation, coming from the annual, the work is the recognition of what you would suggest doing, at least in the next year, right?
Okay.
Because in any 3-year cycle, we should be looking at now, obviously, immediately after the end of one season, what we should be doing in the next one. And so I think it would be really helpful to us, for you guys to have the knowledge to indicate here's what you've observed. And yes, this may be a somewhat normal 3-year cycle, but we may not have the same people around in 3 years. So just what would you suggest, based on what you've seen in the pre and the post and where we are, what should we be doing?
We can definitely redo this recommendation section, be a little more specific for next year.
Yeah, I think that would help, because a lot of it, it truly is cut and paste, which again, some of that would be appropriate. But I think there's enough difference in your results and where we are in the contract that it should not reflect the same thing as last year. So.
And there, we really need this quickly. We're in the process of doing this RFP now. And we don't know who else will bid for it, but we're trying to get this out within the next week or two. So anything that other than what's here, specificity would help.
If we can shoot to get you a revised report by a week from tomorrow and at the end of next week, does that work?
Yeah, if you get a little sooner, it would help.
Okay.
Yeah, let's say Wednesday if you could. To be honest, we're trying to get it out by the end of next week. We may not meet that deadline, but that's what we're trying for.
So it's the 15th.
And I'd also like to ask a kind of a general question here. As we've mentioned, we do have a grant from the state, the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program, that has enabled us to do a very comprehensive study of the health of the lake. This was mostly driven by the algae blooms that have grown and the concern that with climate change, with warmer temperatures, shorter ice freeze periods, and potential for extreme rain events like we saw this year. We've been doing monthly measurements of a whole range of metrics. The results of that, we've now completed that data collection. Brown and Caldwell and Andrew Goldberg is here representing Brown and Caldwell. This includes the dynamics of the flow of the water, includes dissolved oxygen, phosphorus levels, temperatures at depth, and so on. I'm wondering, what I'm concerned that the work that you've been doing with the herbicide treatment is disconnected from the work that we're doing in that study. I'd like to see those two connected in ways, and I don't know enough of the science, but how can the information that you have help that report, and how can that report and its analysis help you in planning or dosing or whatever it is? And I wonder if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to review. I'd like to be able to review the report when it's done. I think, it's knowing more about the flow rate, knowing more about the nutrient dynamics may not necessarily be applicable fully to weed control. Weed control, weeds generally are responding to sediment conditions. They get most of their nutrients from the sediment.
We did, by the way, a sediment analysis. We don't
Okay.
have the data from that yet, but we did some cores.
Yeah, so there may be some crossover on the weed control. That may be more limited, but I think it's definitely going to have, as you mentioned right off the bat, it's going to have more of a relevance to algae blooms and algae control, which we really haven't been doing for you guys.
Although you mentioned algae in
Yep.
some of your recommendations.
Yeah, and I even remember back when I was out there, I remember seeing the water, especially in Basin 2, where Basin 3 has a lot of weed growth, a lot of native and weed growth. It's almost filters itself to some extent. Definitely the bloom was more obvious out on Basin 2, where there's more kind of less weed growth out in the main part of it. So I'd be curious to see what potential options you would have. I'm sure some of it will be watershed based recommendations, but there's also options to do in lake nutrient management as well to help address that. And then, like I said, there may be some crossover to the weeds. It may be limited, but it certainly would like to the opportunity to review the study and see what we could glean from it for weed control purposes.
Yeah, so I just mentioned that we do have a website. It's very simple, healthylakeboon.org, where we have some of our preliminary data. But I also wonder if Andrew Goldberg, who represents Brown and Caldwell, if there are any comments you want to make.
Thank you, Dan. We have moved, as you mentioned, from the monitoring phase of this program and are just now starting the analysis with all of the lab data coming back and all of the volunteer collected water quality data and stream flow data. So we're in a really exciting transition point in that project. We anticipate providing a report in spring of 2022. So a whole robust analysis of the work that's been done over the last year or so has not yet been developed because we're still analyzing the data. We're really just starting that. And I want to bring up the point that you just mentioned, Dominic, that and Dan, that sediment really might be the key here, that we're eagerly awaiting the results of that state testing laboratory. I know that they're backlogged a little bit and they've promised the report, but we're still waiting on it. So hopefully we'll have that soon. And if you don't mind me saying so, I know that we'll be happy to share what we find and what we're learning. Likewise, I think we can learn a lot from your report and incorporate the recommendations to it, because the watershed approach needs to match what's happening in the lake to achieving those outcomes.
Yeah, and I think I just want to make sure that, as part of this RFP, we're going to really insist that there be active communications in ways that, frankly, we haven't gotten what we wanted in the past year, especially between Solitude, the Lake Boon Commission, the Conservation Commissions, and this project and the Lake Boon Association, so on, so that it really feels like it's a cohesive effort to maintain and improve the health of the lake and develop plans over the long haul, really over tens of years, not just, the 3 years, to really sustain the lake on a comprehensive integrated basis.
Yeah, 100% agree. And I know Dave's probably shared with you some of the issues that we've struggled with over the last couple of years, and we're doing everything we can to remedy those as well. We want to get back to the way it has been in the past. So we are actively working on that. That's our number one goal moving forward.
Do you want to elaborate a little further on what the issues have been and what you're doing to resolve them?
So, I mean, it really resolves around staffing, both, organic issues, but also, COVID certainly has had some issues. It's caused many issues with our staffing. It's, just loss of staff. And this year, the weather was a big factor as well. It's just fouled up our schedule like you wouldn't believe with all the huge rain events and having to shuffle things around with less people to begin with as well. Just it boiled over for when that real heavy busy part of the summer. It was super challenging for us, and as things were missed and were very regrettably missed, and we're trying to own up to that. But we're high. I mean, we've had meetings, upper level meetings. We've looked at our pay structure. We've looked at our culture. We've looked at everything. We've been hiring like crazy. And we did make some hires that over the season, from last season, just didn't work out. I think, the employment climate out there is very strange right now with COVID and what they call the Great Resignation that I've heard a lot about. So we've experienced that as well, with people having other opportunities. And it's, I think Dave is we did not have an operations manager last year. So Dave's is a new position. I think that speaks a lot to our commitment to this movement back to where we would all like to be. We also didn't have a dedicated business district manager, which we do now as well. And we have, we've made a lot of new hires, a lot of good hires, and they're coming up to speed. So we're all really optimistic about next year because I know it's hurt our clients, but it's personally, I know for me, and I know I speak for most of the staff here, it was disheartening for us as well not to be able to provide that level of service. And we all want to get back to that as well. So
I'm sorry, to Dom's point, COVID did play a large role in, I think, just about every business right across the board, but it impacted us here as well. And since about the midpoint of the summer, we have hired 6 more specialists. We brought in 2 more biologists, and recently Sean McCarthy, who's on the call with us today, has many years of project management experience. We're really excited to have Sean as a member of the team here. So our commitment really is to getting to the level of customer service that we have had in the past with the company, and we will do that again. And we've got a lot of very talented people who have joined us, and we're looking forward to next season.
Well, I hope that, I understand what you're saying. I hope that all that, plays out well, and I appreciate the good intent behind that. I would also just add that, if there are times where, the staff shortage or whatever the issue is, frankly, a note to tell us, gee, here's our problem, please be patient, is better than silence.
Well, absolutely, Dan, and we appreciate your patience as we've worked through these issues. And right now we are being totally transparent, and we're not trying to hide the fact that we had these issues. And we certainly are disappointed that we weren't able to provide the level of service at times that we should have. So, and I've used myself as a direct contact, regardless of who the project manager ends up being. Feel free for anyone to contact me at any time. I believe I'm very responsive to questions and concerns. I may not have an answer right away, but I certainly will work on getting one.
Dave, when you talk about the hiring you've done, I assume that's your whole national organization, not just us in New England. Can you speak to how many people are on the team for us?
We are right now, and to answer your question, Red, yes, nationally, the company has really made strides to, fill any employment gaps that we had. We struggled nationwide, just like every other company out there, I think, with, COVID impacting people's willingness to work. And we did raise our starting pay by a considerable amount for our specialists. And currently we have, right now we have 9 specialists on board. We have 2 more we've interviewed that we've extended offers to. So we will go into the season with 11 specialists, 4 biologists, including one of whom is a project manager. And
is that for us, Massachusetts, or at least New England?
That is for the New England territory. Yes, sir. Yeah.
Because I know even during the best of times earlier in the year, it was quite clear the specialists were spread very thin. When you're trying to have a communication with them, they're in New York or they're someplace else. And I could have this picture of them flying around the country trying to do a job for us. And it just has to be better than it was.
Yeah, and my objective is to make certain that we have a level of consistency with that. So you'll have the same person coming there. So we can, first of all, we can have them build a relationship where they can help you with your questions, and it'll be someone that you're familiar with. So that is definitely one of my chief objectives for the coming season.
And hopefully Sam's foot is recovered.
Yeah, yes, really. Okay, so I think we accomplished our goal of getting, having an opportunity to ask questions about the year-end report and understand more about it. I think we collectively, can see a few things that you guys maybe could work on to clarify for us and resubmit, and that would be really helpful. As Dan said, the sooner the better for us. So if by mid next week, we can have an update that's just a little bit more specific to really what your recommendations are going forward, and maybe a few corrections for wrong dates and the wrong order of conditions, that element, that would be excellent.
Absolutely.
So hopefully you don't have a ton of work that you have to do on that, honestly. I mean, it's just we just have to have a pretty good sense of what came out of this year, what your vision is, based on having been our vendor for the last previous 2 years. What are you suggesting going forward? So this has been excellent, and thank you, Solitude, for your transparency today and honesty here. We appreciate that, and I think we can let Solitude go.
Just for a moment, can I just see if either Kathy or Pam, as the Conservation Commission reps, have any comments or questions?
Thanks, Dan. I actually did have one thing. So as the report is getting revised, I guess I would just ask that you take a look at the order of conditions. I think the Stowe and Hudson permits are pretty much identical, if not identical. And that where there is a specific list of things that we had asked to be addressed, that those be explicitly addressed in the report. And if, for example, you didn't do the water quality sampling, I think it'd be helpful to say, this wasn't done and here's why. Because one of the things we want these permits to be is adaptive as we move forward. So if there are changes that we should be thinking about over time, that's helpful for us to hear.
Excellent. Thank you, Kathy.
Yeah, and I would reiterate what Kathy said, also what Dan brought up before. The Hudson Commission is very concerned about coordinating the results from the Healthy Lake Boon with the contract going forward. So they do want the contract to be flexible enough to, to change as we learn more about the lake. So that is another concern. But I do really appreciate your inviting us to this meeting. This was really helpful for me to hear all this and to report back to the commission, because they are pretty interested in all the herbicide treatment. So thank you.
Thank you both
And
for
one
attending.
last comment here, Chris.
Yeah.
I mean, just to be clear, probably lower priority than rewriting the recommendations would be, we will get the interim report data in some form.
Yeah, no, I'm going to try to include I'm going to try to add a section into the revised report for you.
Okay. Thank you, Dominic.
Excellent. Okay, so thank you, Solitude, members of Solitude, and we'll let you get on with the rest of your day or lunch. And then we have just a few things to finish up our LBC meeting, so rest can hold on if you would.
All right. Bye,
Great,
everyone.
thank you.
so much for
Thank you very
joining us.
much.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, and all.
Bye.
Have a great day.
You too.
Thank you.
Okay, so the other things that we have on our agenda today were bills for payment, and specifically, we have one outstanding bill from Solitude. So this is the final billing, actually, on this contract from Solitude. We did receive it back in November. We kind of worked through this. So that bill is for $1,562.50. And I'm wondering if we are now at a place where we choose to move forward and pay that. Conrad?
I think we should. I think we should pay it now. We've communicated to them the concerns we've had. They will need to provide their final report. Maybe we wait until Wednesday when they give the rest of the pieces that we're asking for. But, in spite of the concerns, they did do the treatment, and I think we need to close this out by approving this payment.
I agree.
Okay, so can we have a motion then and for payment?
A motion to approve the payment of the Solitude bill of $1,562.50, split appropriately between Hudson and Stowe.
I second.
All righty, any further discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right,
Unanimous.
that is all three of us, so it is unanimous. So I paperwork through on that. Excellent. All right. So next we just had public comment, and I just left it at the end in case we had anybody on the call that had any comment that we should hear, whether it was related to the herbicide or anything else at this point. So I'm opening that up. Anything for public comment?
Joan has her hand up.
Sorry, who does? Oh, go ahead, Joan.
Muted.
Joan, are you muted?
She's still muted.
And I'm sorry, meanwhile, who said Joan what?
She's still muted.
All I see is the Joan's iPad. I don't know which Joan this
Yeah, I
is.
don't know who this is. Let's see.
Going once, going twice.
Wait, hang on, let me look at the chat. Hold on, let's just see. Yeah, nope, I don't have anything there. Okay, so yep, still don't see anything in the chat that might be from her. Okay, so then I am assuming we have no public comment. Close on that. Just to close out our meeting, is there any particular new business that members of the commission want to raise for a next meeting?
I just want to say, I've been taking minutes as well as I can. I'll summarize this, taking notes, and I'll summarize in minutes, but I just want to acknowledge that, this is a very technical discussion, and I think we should say that technical details, and comments should be summarized in their report, and that we'll just refer to comments rather than trying to really have these minutes reflect this full scientific depth.
Absolutely. In fact, Dan, I would say your minutes from this review, maybe it's a couple of sentences, and it's really the action items. It's, we did this. These are the action items they're taking, and kind of go from there, because we can't reiterate the entire conversations. It's just way too much information. So I think you can really boil it way down, Dan. I don't want you to
That's
have
a
to
blessed gift you're giving.
Yeah.
Hey, Chris, is there a way to save the transcripts? Because it might help Dan do his notes.
Well, it is recorded. So there's that.
I'm going to guess that, and the recording is better than transcripts, and maybe Laura can weigh in here. But my experience with automated transcripts is that they're useful, but the full video and audio recording should be if people need more, or like if I do, that's the sort of record.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think I have it set to actually save the transcript. Laura, did you have a comment? Oops,
You're muted.
You're on mute.
The transcript has been very accurate, and if you click on the live transcript, you can view the full transcript, and you could cut and paste that maybe before you get off the Zoom thing. But if you click on full transcript, it'll come up in a box, like the chat box, and you could cut and paste that and save that in if it is helpful. But it has been very accurate, in my opinion.
Good. And I think to underscore your point, I believe, Chris, you have to do it before you close the session.
I think it won't, I think it'll disappear, but I'm not positive because I haven't had access to it afterwards.
Yeah.
And I hope you're enjoying your time on the beach there, Laura.
I tried to save the background picture so it's there. I'm technologically impaired here, so sorry. Now you have two heads. It's better than one.
No, but I'm commenting about the beach. It looks so warm.
Yeah, I wish I was there.
Hey, Dan. Hey, Dan, I've not been able to connect with Denise yet. Do you want to have any of the discussions that you and I have been having with the group here?
Yeah, I think it would be helpful, and Chris, if we could, to bring you up to date on what we've done in terms of the new RFP and what we're thinking of. So maybe, is that okay, Chris? Just take a few moments on that, because we may need to have another LBC meeting, next week in order to wrap it up, to get your approval if you think so.
So yes, I guess. Yeah. You mean at a high level? We're not gonna walk through the
right.
Yeah.
Red?
Okay.
Red, you want to take the lead?
Sure, sure. Yeah, Dan and I have been talking about, particularly after the Hudson Concom meeting, where they brought in several questions about, are we really studying this, or are we just kind of doing what we did previously? So we started toying with the concept of how do we fold together the Healthy Lake Boone Initiative data and the weed. And I think right now, one of the things we're thinking about is, rather than a 3-year contract, have, and this is what I'm waiting for word from Denise on, having this be a 1-year treat and study contract with during the end of that first year, you've studied and you've decided what you want to do for years 2 and 3 and beyond, which would then be another RFP, now chock full of new data from Healthy Lake Boone and whatever you get from your weed treatment company. So, like I said, I'm trying to get Denise to weigh in on that idea. She was very uncomfortable. We had talked about other variable approaches that only committed the first year, but left second and third year variable. She wasn't terribly comfortable with that and said that would have to be pretty precisely defined for people to actually still be willing to bid the project. So now we're, dropping back 10 and thinking about a 1-year contract that's treat and study. And the treatment would be by historical methods, just like we've talked about today, but integrating them into the study of the lake to figure out how those things fit, and then do another RFP next year for beyond.
I think that,
Properly stated, Dan?
Yes.
yeah. So I think that's actually a pretty good approach. I mean, we have to budget, obviously, a year, over a year in advance. So we just kind of have to factor that in, that whatever monies, LBC might need into not this spring, because we already estimated that, but later in the summer, or on into the following spring, is something we have to, we really have to think about. So
Right, and that's actually why we want to get this out quickly. If we
Yep.
can get this out by, say, end of next week, and that's why the
Yep.
pressure on Solitude to give us that information,
Yep.
then, and give it a month, then we're in mid-January, and if we can get then we'll have numbers, and if we can select by the end of January, we'll be able to put into the town meeting request not just the 22,000 that is the balance until June, but then whatever else is needed. It still gets a little tricky because there's a subsequent year, but I think we'll have that information. And really, we can't bid the 2 years beyond that. We just don't know, because we're trying to see what a fresh look, given all of this information we have.
Yep.
I mean, I have to believe Denise is going to be positive on narrowing it down to 1 year, so we get all the variables defined. The other thing that did come to light is, because of the budget cycle, there's more pressure for us to get this done earlier rather than later. We can't really worry about ice out. We have to worry about budget timing, which really forces us into trying to get it done by the middle of December rather than the end of December.
So then the question is whether we need to, where we last left off on the RFP was that you had seen, the LBC had seen the initial version. We'd had some high level discussion about it. We were going to run it by you, and whether we need to have another LBC meeting next week, Wednesday or Thursday or something, to see this, get your approval of it, or whether our concept of a 1-year RFP, if we send it to you and you give feedback, is enough.
I think the latter, as long as we incorporate, really what we're recommending, what we're hearing is probably the right thing for this coming year for treatment wise. So, just our goal would be
with the concept.
Yes, absolutely. Yep. Conrad, would you be okay with that?
I am.
Okay.
I'm listening intently. If I have comments, you'll hear them, believe me. It's interesting for me. I have, a lot of the questions that are asked, have been asked in the past, but you guys never had the opportunity to get those answers. So I was really happy to see Solitude, answering all the questions you both had, or all three of you had.
And I'll also just mention that there is another contractor
Okay,
from
so
Connecticut. And I've spoken with that person, so I believe that we will have more than one bid. And so we will review on the basis of quality as well as cost.
Yeah,
So,
sounds good.
so with that,
and
then
from being at
go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say, having when you went to Hudson Concom, did they have any thoughts on other like potential, vendors for this work?
They didn't mention any.
Okay. Okay.
So with that plan, then Red and I, and thank you, Red, for all your hard work on this. If you can contact Denise, talk this through with her, we've got a pretty good solid draft there, and we'll then run it by you and Chris and Conray. But we don't need to have another LBC meeting. We're based on this this concept.
Yep. And what I would say is be very aware of study part of it needs to be completed very soon at the end of season, because again, we need to be in a position to make get another RFP out in probably November, let's just say next year. For the follow-on year or years. So just that should be incorporated into the RFP, that the study element would need to be completed by.
Just be done in October.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
I mean, the other thing that maybe should be mentioned, Dan, that you mentioned to me the other day, is in your discussion with Habitat and talking about the Healthy Lake Boone Initiative data, he was quite encouraged that can help define the treatments and maybe be more effective with less. So that was an interesting
the
comment
flow
from somebody who knows
information
what
can
they're
help.
doing.
The flow of the water flow cycles and so on can help do the dosage. But I think at this point we have to leave it up to whoever bids to provide whatever information we will give to them, that they will all operate with the same basis of the same data that Solitude had, the treatment history, the management recommendations. Whoever bids will operate with the same information, so nobody has an advantage.
Hey guys, you got to be a little careful here. We're getting way off agenda topics.
Yes. So new business.
All right. Well, that was what we needed to clarify.
Yep.
And I also have a hard stop coming up shortly. Maybe I can give a couple of minutes, but I do have a hard stop.
Yes. So we are done, I think, with new business element, and move on to date of next meeting, which I think we were having a little conversation with there. Do we need a meeting in the next couple of weeks? The only we've already approved.
So Chris, I think we can
Stowe and sorry.
Chris, we can leave the next meeting up to you a little bit. So why don't we just table that for now?
Yep.
And depending if required one, just send out a note and we'll coordinate calendars.
Okay. I don't think we will need another one until we're into January, but we'll
Your discretion.
Okay. So do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn. So moved.
I second.
All right. All in favor?
Everybody.
Aye.
That is unanimous, and thank you all.
Quick comment,
Dave?
Chris.
Dave?
Quick comment. The closed captioning is amazingly accurate. It's way better than anything on TV, and I had never seen it before. And it's much faster too. It's right in real time.
Yeah, it's very fast. It is kind of, there are a few funky things that I noticed, but it can't possibly, especially names of chemicals and whatever. So yeah.
Right. So
All right,
don't
I will
forget
look
to
at-
save it. Don't forget to save it before you just.
I'm gonna, I tried, I'm gonna, before I close the meeting, end the meeting, I will try again. It didn't look like it actually would save the entire thing, but I'll look at it again.
All right.
All right, so it is
Bye-bye.
12:30 and we are adjourned.
Yeah, have a good lunch.
All right, bye all.